AITA for offering to split the bill equally with the girl in a restaurant on a date. She wanted to pay me differently. So, I recently decided to jump back into the dating pool after taking a break for a while. You know, focusing on myself, working on my career, that whole spiel. Eventually, I figured, why not give online dating another shot? I signed up on one of the more popular apps, set up a decent profile with some good pictures, and added a description that, admittedly, might have been a bit blunt. I specifically mentioned that I prefer splitting bills on dates. I've always been of the mindset that first dates are a chance to get to know each other, not a financial commitment on my part. To me, it's about equality and fairness. If we hit it off, sure, I'll treat here and there, but on a first date, nah, I think we both come in on equal footing. Anyway, after a few days of swiping and small talk with various matches, I started chatting with this one girl. Let's call her Sarah. She seemed great, smart, funny, confident, and our conversation flowed easily. We talked about our jobs, shared some memes, and even had a little debate about the best pizza toppings. For the record, pineapple is a no-go for me, and she thought I was insane for that. After a couple of days, we decided to meet in person. Now, here's where things get interesting. I asked Sarah where she'd like to go, wanting to give her the freedom to choose. She immediately suggested this super fancy restaurant downtown, like one of those restaurants, the kind where the menu doesn't have prices listed, and you know you're going to need a small loan to afford dessert. It surprised me a little, but I figured, hey, she must really like this place, and maybe it'll make for a memorable first date. Besides, I thought, she's seen my profile and knows my stance on splitting bills, so there shouldn't be any awkwardness. I agreed, and we set a date for the following weekend. When the day came, I made sure to dress up a bit, nothing over the top, just a nice button-up and slacks. I got to the restaurant a few minutes early, checked in with the hostess, and waited. Sarah showed up right on time, looking amazing. I mean, seriously, she turned heads when she walked in. She had this confident energy about her that was really attractive, and I was already feeling optimistic about the night. We got seated at this cozy little corner table with a great view of the city. The ambience was perfect, dim lighting, soft music, the whole 9 yards. We started talking, and honestly, the conversation was great. She was funny, engaging, and we seemed to have a lot in common. When it came time to order, I decided to play it safe and chose a moderately priced dish of simple pasta. Sarah, on the other hand, went all out. She ordered the most expensive entree on the menu, plus a fancy cocktail and an appetizer. I noticed it, but I didn't say anything. I mean, it's her meal, and she should get what she wants, right? The food came, and it was incredible. We ate, we laughed, and for a moment, I thought this might actually turn into something special. Then the check arrived. That's when the vibe shifted. The waiter placed the bill discreetly at the edge of the table, sliding it onto the smooth white tablecloth with practiced ease, as if trying not to disturb the cozy atmosphere. I glanced at it out of the corner of my eye for a moment, hesitating before reaching for it. It wasn't one of those situations where I was worried about the total. I had a rough idea of what my order cost. I picked it up and flipped it open, my eyes scanning the neatly itemized list of dishes and drinks. There it was, her expensive entree, her fancy cocktail, my modest pasta, and a single drink. The total was steep, no doubt about it, but it wasn't shocking. It was what I had expected given the restaurant she chose. I pulled out my card, sliding it onto the leather folder without much thought. In my mind, this was straightforward. I'd cover my half, and she'd cover hers. No drama, no confusion. After all, this wasn't my first time on a date, and I'd made my stance on bills crystal clear from the get-go. As the waiter returned to swipe my card, I casually glanced up at Sarah. She was still smiling, fiddling with the tiny clasp on her purse, her fingers moving absent-mindedly over the gold detailing. It didn't strike me as odd at first. I figured she was just waiting for her turn to handle her portion. When the waiter brought back the receipt, I signed it quickly and slid the bill folder back across the table, nudging it gently toward her side. "All set for my half," I said, keeping my tone light and casual, fully expecting her to follow suit. But she didn't move, not even a twitch. Instead, she kept fidgeting with her purse, her hands now dipping inside but not pulling anything out. Her eyes stayed fixed on the table for a few seconds longer than felt natural, and a flicker of awkwardness passed over her face. It was subtle, but I caught it. After a moment, I couldn't ignore the silence anymore. I tilted my head and asked, "Oh, did you forget your wallet?" She looked up at me, blinking a couple of times like she was trying to process what I'd just said. Her expression shifted from confusion to something closer to disbelief. "What do you mean?" she asked, her tone caught somewhere between a genuine question and mild annoyance. I blinked back, now just as confused as she seemed to be. The check," I said slowly, gesturing toward the folders still sitting in front of her. "I covered my half, I thought you'd." My voice trailed off as I watched her expression change again. Her lips curled into a small, incredulous smile, and then she cut me off mid-sentence with a soft laugh. "Wait," she said, leaning back in her chair slightly. "You're not paying for the whole thing?" That laugh and those words caught me completely off guard. I wasn't sure if I was more confused or stunned by her reaction. "No," I started, my voice laced with uncertainty. "I mean, I thought it was clear. My profile says I don't pay the full bill on first dates." I tried to keep my tone steady and matter-of-fact, but the way she was looking at me was throwing me off. She stared at me like I'd just suggested something completely outrageous, her brows furrowing slightly before lifting in disbelief. "You were serious about that?" she asked, her voice tinged with amusement and just a hint of indignation. "I thought it was a joke or something. Guys are supposed to pay on dates." There was something about the way she said it so matter-of-fact, like it was an unspoken rule etched into stone that made me pause. I took a breath, trying to gather my thoughts before responding. "I mean," I said, carefully choosing my words, "I'm happy to pay my share, but I've always been upfront about splitting the bill." "I thought you'd seen that on my profile." I gave her a small, almost apologetic smile, hoping to diffuse whatever tension was starting to build. But she wasn't having it. Her expression shifted again, her eyes narrowing slightly as she leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "Well," she said, her voice dropping to a flatter, more exasperated tone, "I didn't bring any money. I thought you'd handle it." That sentence hit me like a ton of bricks. Who goes to a high-end restaurant without at least bringing something? I tried to keep my cool and said, "I'm not trying to make this awkward, but I didn't plan to pay for everything. I assumed we were on the same page." She gave me this incredulous look and said, "Wow. So, you're just going to leave me hanging here?" I was at a loss for words. "I'm not leaving you hanging. I already paid for my half. I didn't expect to cover the whole thing." She crossed her arms and said, "Unbelievable. You're really going to make this a thing?" At this point, I could feel the tension radiating from the table. The waiter was hovering nearby, pretending to rearrange cutlery but clearly eavesdropping. I said, "Look, I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding, but I think it's fair for us to split the bill." She sighed dramatically, grabbed her purse, and said, "Whatever, I'll figure it out." She walked over to the waiter, and I'm guessing she explained the situation, because he came back a few minutes later with a more serious look on his face. I stayed at the table, feeling both frustrated and embarrassed. Eventually, Sarah came back, grabbed her things, and said, "You know what? Do not count on a pleasant continuation of this evening. This was ridiculous." I tried to salvage the situation one last time. "I didn't mean for this to go badly. I thought we were clear about expectations." She just scoffed and said, "Good luck finding someone else who will deal with this nonsense." Then she walked out. I sat there for a minute, stunned. The night had gone from great to disastrous in record time. On the way home, I couldn't stop replaying the whole thing in my head. Did I mess up? Was I wrong to stick to my principles? Or was it unreasonable for her to assume I'd cover everything without even bringing money? I'm still processing it. What do you guys think? Am I the asshole here, or was she out of line? Update. Hi, everyone. I wasn't planning to post again, but something unexpected happened, and I felt like I had to share this bizarre update. So, after the disaster of a first date I told you about, I honestly thought that was it. I unmatched her on the dating app, chalked it up as a lesson learned, and moved on. I didn't expect to hear from Sarah again. In fact, I was relieved she clearly wasn't on the same page as me about expectations, and I figured it was better to just leave it at that. But then, out of nowhere, a few days later, I get a text. It's Sarah. I almost didn't believe it at first because the way things had ended on our first date was nothing short of a train wreck. She had been so adamant about how ridiculous my behavior was, her words, not mine, that I assumed there was no coming back from it. Yet here she was, messaging me as if nothing had happened. Her text was casual, even friendly. She started with a simple "Hey, how are you?" The kind of message you'd send to an old friend or a coworker you hadn't seen in a while. Not the kind of message you'd expect from someone who stormed out of a restaurant after refusing to pay for her meal. I stared at my phone for a solid minute, my thumb hovering over the screen as I debated whether or not to reply. On one hand, the memory of that awkward, tension-filled night was still fresh in my mind. On the other hand, curiosity gnawed at me. Why was she reaching out now? Was she trying to apologize, or was this some kind of strange power move? Against my better judgment, I responded with a polite but cautious message, and to my surprise, the conversation quickly took off. What stood out to me was how effortlessly charming she was. It was almost disarming. She acted like the past incident didn't exist at all, as if the disastrous first date was some kind of fever dream we'd both imagined. She didn't bring up the restaurant or the check. Instead, she focused on light, friendly topics, asking how my week had been and even cracking a few jokes. The more we talked, the harder it became to reconcile this version of Sarah with the one who had called me a child for not paying her bill. Then, she dropped a bombshell. She told me she'd been thinking about me and missed talking to me. I'll admit, I was caught off guard. Part of me wanted to call her out right then and there, to ask how she could miss me after walking out of our date in a huff. But the way she spoke, it felt like she was genuinely trying to smooth things over. Her tone was warm, almost vulnerable, and I couldn't help but wonder if maybe, just maybe, she regretted how things had played out. What completely threw me off, though, was her next suggestion. She wanted to go out with me again. Not just anywhere, but to the same restaurant. I actually had to reread the message to make sure I hadn't misunderstood. The same restaurant. The one where everything had gone so sideways the first time. It was such an unexpected request that I couldn't help but laugh. Who in their right mind suggests going back to the scene of the crime, so to speak? I thought maybe she was joking, but as the conversation went on, it became clear she was serious. She said it would be fun and assured me that things would be better this time because we knew each other a bit better now. I had to admit, her confidence was impressive, if nothing else. Still, I wasn't about to dive back in without addressing the elephant in the room. I told her straight up that I didn't mind meeting her again, but it couldn't be like last time. She brushed it off with ease, telling me not to even think about it and promising that everything will be fine. Her tone was so casual and dismissive that I found myself wondering if she truly understood what had gone wrong on the first date or if she was just hoping I'd forgotten. Either way, she seemed so genuinely eager to see me again that I thought, why not? Maybe I was overthinking the whole thing. Maybe she really had reflected on what happened and wanted to start fresh. Or maybe she was just looking for company and was willing to overlook the past to get it. Either way, I figured one more date wouldn't hurt, especially if we were both clear about expectations this time. What's the worst that could happen, right? So, I agreed. I told myself she deserved a second chance, and besides, I couldn't deny I was curious about how this would play out. Part of me also thought she might be reaching out because she hadn't dated anyone in a while and was looking for companionship. Maybe the weirdness of the first date was just a fluke. I convinced myself that this time would be different. That evening, I met her at the restaurant again. She looked stunning, as always, and her energy was warm and inviting. I'll admit, I was cautiously optimistic. We got seated, and the conversation flowed naturally. We laughed, talked about our week, and shared stories. It felt nice. I started to let my guard down a bit, thinking maybe I had been too harsh in judging her the first time. When it came time to order, I noticed something. She wasn't holding back. Again, she ordered multiple appetizers, an expensive entree, a dessert, and a couple of cocktails. It was easily double, maybe triple, what I'd ordered. I kept my cool, though. I figured as long as she understood we were splitting the bill, it didn't matter what she got. From time to time, she dropped hints about how she was looking forward to a fun night and how she hoped the evening would have a nice ending. I picked up on what she was implying, but I brushed it off. I wasn't about to make assumptions or let that influence anything. I was here to see if we could genuinely connect, not to fall into some transactional setup. The meal went on, and everything seemed fine. Then the bill arrived. I glanced at it, and sure enough, her half was significantly larger than mine. But I didn't say anything at first. I took out my card, paid for half, and slid the check toward her. I told her I'd covered my portion, and now it was her turn. That's when the whole mood shifted. She leaned back in her chair, crossing her legs slowly, with a confidence that radiated entitlement. Her lips curled into a faint smirk, a look that was equal parts playful and condescending. It was as if she believed she held all the cards in this situation, like she was testing me, daring me to make the move she expected. For a moment, she just sat there, studying me, as though waiting for me to realize some unspoken rule I had apparently failed to follow. Then, in an almost exaggeratedly casual manner, she shifted, and crossing her legs deliberately and adjusting her posture. As she did, she spread her knees slightly in my direction, leaning forward just enough to draw attention, her body language calculated to make a point without saying a word. Her voice softened, dripping with a sweetness that felt entirely rehearsed, as she told me that I should act like a real man and cover her part of the bill. The way she said it wasn't just a suggestion, it was a challenge. Her tone was gentle, almost seductive, but there was an undeniable edge of smugness to it, as though she was certain this would be the moment I caved. She spoke as if she was handing me an opportunity to redeem myself in her eyes, fully expecting me to fold under the pressure of her charm. It was so blatant, so utterly calculated, that I had to fight the urge to laugh at the absurdity of it all. She didn't stop there. Her words came with a veiled promise, one she clearly thought would seal the deal. She hinted that she wanted to get to the fun part of the evening, making her intentions unmistakably clear. There was no ambiguity left in her tone, no room for misinterpretation. The playful hints she had been dropping all night were now fully laid out on the table. Her confidence was almost impressive in its brazenness, as though she believed there was no way I could possibly say no. But even as she sat there, using every trick in the book to sweet-talk me into footing the bill for her extravagant meal, I couldn't get past the sheer audacity of it. The entitlement was overwhelming. The way she framed it, this wasn't a mutual exchange of interest or connection, it was transactional, pure and simple. And the way she presented herself, as though she was doing me some kind of favor, only made it worse. I kept my composure, though, refusing to let the situation rattle me. I calmly explained that I had already paid for my half of the bill and that she needed to take care of hers. Her smile, which had been so confident and self-assured just moments ago, faltered slightly. It wasn't a dramatic change, but there was a flicker of something behind her eyes: shock, disbelief, maybe even irritation. It was as if she couldn't process the fact that I wasn't falling into line with her expectations. She sighed dramatically, leaning forward across the table, her voice dropping to a whisper. She told me, in an almost conspiratorial tone, that she didn't have her wallet with her. Her words were deliberate and slow, as though trying to make the situation sound less like an inconvenience and more like an opportunity. Then, with a coy smile, she added that she could pay me differently. The implication was clear, and the way she said it, playful, teasing, with just a hint of mockery, made it all the more uncomfortable. The sheer audacity of the moment hit me like a wave. It wasn't just the words she chose or the tone she used. It was the way she delivered it, as though this was all part of some game she thought she was winning. Her confidence in her ability to manipulate the situation was so blatant it was almost fascinating, like watching someone bluff their way through a high-stakes poker game without realizing their opponent had already called them out. It wasn't seductive, it wasn't endearing. It was transactional, calculated, and deeply unsettling. But I didn't back down. I told her that she ordered a lot much more than me and it was only fair she pay her share. For a moment, she just stared at me, her expression unreadable. Then, out of nowhere, she reached into her purse and pulled out her wallet. She paid the bill, threw down the receipt, and stood up abruptly. She looked down at me with this icy glare and said, "You're still a child." It's too early for you to be asking women out." Before I could even respond, she turned and walked out of the restaurant without looking back. I sat there for a moment, completely stunned. The whole thing felt surreal. The most baffling part, I didn't even ask her out. She was the one who texted me. She was the one who wanted to go to the restaurant. She was the one who expected me to cover her extravagant meal. I left the restaurant that night feeling a mix of frustration, disbelief, and relief. Frustration because the whole situation was so unnecessary, disbelief at her nerve, and relief that I wouldn't have to deal with her again. Safe to say, there won't be a third date.